Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Family Facade. Corey Nixon had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years as a private investigator had honed his instincts to a razor's edge, teaching him that the most dangerous lies came wrapped in the most beautiful truths. But standing in his marble-floored kitchen that Friday evening, watching his wife Jeanette Harrell Nixon prepare dinner, while their 12-year-old daughter Myra bounced excitedly about her first high school party invitation, he felt only the warm contentment of a man who believed he'd built something unshakable. "Dad, can you believe Kelly Hopper invited me? She's like the coolest 8th grader ever." Myra's auburn hair caught the light as she spun around, her excitement infectious. Corey ruffled her hair, his weathered hands gentle despite their size. "Just remember what we talked about, sweetheart. Smart choices, and call if you need anything." Jeanette looked up from the stove, her blonde hair perfectly styled even after a full day at her real estate office. "Corey, she'll be fine. It's just a pool party at the Hopper house. Agnes Cervantes will be their chaperoning." She smiled that radiant smile that had captured his heart 15 years ago. "You worry too much." The evening felt like countless others in their Westfield home. Corey had built this life methodically. The successful PI business, the house in the best neighborhood, the family that was the envy of their social circle. After a childhood of foster homes and military service that had shown him the worst of humanity, he'd created his sanctuary. At 42, Corey's imposing 6-foot frame and steel-gray eyes still commanded respect. His reputation in the investigation business was built on two principles: absolute loyalty to those who earned it, and absolute destruction for those who betrayed it. His wife and daughter were his world, the only people who'd ever seen the gentleman beneath the predator. "I've got that background check to finish up tonight," Corey said, kissing Jeanette's forehead. "The Hoffman divorce case should be wrapped up by the time you get back from dropping Myra off." "Actually," Jeanette said, not meeting his eyes, "Mom's picking her up. She wanted to spend some time with Myra before the party." Corey nodded, though something nagged at him. Donna Tyler, his mother-in-law, had been increasingly present lately, always with reasons that sounded perfectly reasonable. Still, family was family, and he'd learned to pick his battles. The call came at 11:47 p.m. "Mr. Nixon, this is Dr. Francis Calhoun at Westfield General. Your daughter was brought in from a party. You need to come immediately." The 20-minute drive felt like hours. Corey's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Myra was responsible, careful. What could have happened? The hospital's fluorescent lights felt harsh and accusing as he strode through the automatic doors. The desk nurse directed him to the 3rd floor, where he found Dr. Calhoun waiting with 2 police officers. "Mr. Nixon," the doctor began, his face grave. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but—" "Wait." Detective Leonard Hood stepped forward, his expression serious. "Mr. Nixon, before you see your daughter, I need to warn you. What happened tonight? You must not see her. Not yet. We need to prepare you for what you're going to find." Corey's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about? What happened to my daughter?" Dr. Calhoun's voice was barely above a whisper. "Sorry, but we couldn't prevent what happened to her. The trauma was too severe by the time she arrived." The words hit Corey like physical blows. His vision tunneled, and he had to grip the wall to keep from falling. His little girl, his Myra. 15 minutes later, as he sat in the waiting room with his head in his hands, he heard something that stopped his heart. Laughter. Not just any laughter. Jeanette's distinctive musical laugh. The one she saved for truly joyful moments. He looked up to see his wife and mother-in-law emerging from the hallway that led to the patient rooms. They were smiling, talking in low, animated voices. Donna Tyler even looked relieved. "Jeanette," Corey's voice cracked. How can you be laughing?" "Our daughter." Jeanette's face immediately transformed into a mask of grief, but not before Corey caught something in her eyes. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Oh, honey," she said, rushing to his side. "I'm sorry. Mom was just telling me about something to distract me from the pain. You know how I get when I'm overwhelmed." But Corey's trained, I caught everything. The way Donna Tyler quickly looked away, the slight delay in Jeanette's emotional shift, the fact that neither woman's makeup was disturbed by tears. "Can I see her now?" he asked. "The doctors are still working," Jeanette said quickly. "They said it might be a while. Maybe we should go home and wait for them to call." That night, Corey didn't sleep. He lay in bed next to his wife, listening to her breathing, analyzing every interaction from the evening. Something was wrong. Terribly, fundamentally wrong. By dawn, he'd made a decision. If someone was playing games with his family, they were about to learn why Corey Nixon had never lost a case, and why his enemies had a habit of disappearing from his life permanently. Chapter 2. Unraveling the Web. The next morning, Corey arrived at Westfield General at 6 a.m., 2 hours before visiting hours began. His years of cultivating contacts had taught him that hospital security guards were often former cops looking for easier work, and that they appreciated a fellow professional who spoke their language. "Terrible thing about the Nixon girl," security guard Dale Hodges said, accepting the coffee Corey had brought. "Though, I gotta say, strangest reaction I've ever seen from family members." Corey kept his expression neutral. "How do you mean?" "Well, usually when kids come in from accidents, the parents are beside themselves. Your wife and her mother, though, they seemed more like they were celebrating something. Even asked about discharge paperwork before they'd even seen the girl." The first crack in the facade. Corey filed it away and continued his investigation. Dr. Francis Calhoun was more forthcoming than expected when Corey cornered him during his morning rounds. "Your daughter wasn't in the condition we initially reported," he admitted reluctantly. "There was some confusion in the communication. She had some scrapes and bruises, possibly from a fall, but nothing life-threatening. The police involvement was requested by your wife. Something about suspected foul play that never materialized." The second crack. By noon, Corey had spoken to 6 hospital staff members, 3 police officers, and 2 paramedics. The picture emerging made his blood run cold. Myra had indeed been brought to the hospital, but not as the victim of some terrible accident. She'd been brought in by Agnes Cervantes, who'd found her locked in a storage shed behind the Hopper house, crying and claiming her mother had told her to hide there and not come out no matter what. The paramedics had found minor injuries consistent with deliberately inflicted bruises. Someone had hurt his daughter on purpose. The police had been called not by the hospital, but by Jeanette herself, who'd arrived before Corey and had specifically requested that he be told Myra was gravely injured and that he shouldn't see her. Corey sat in his car outside the hospital, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Someone had deliberately hurt his daughter and manipulated him into believing she was dying. Someone who had access to their family schedule, who knew he would respond exactly as he had. Someone close enough to orchestrate this entire scenario. His phone buzzed with a text from Jeanette. "Myra's doing better. Doctors say she can come home tomorrow. You're such a good father. She's lucky to have you." The emotional manipulation was textbook, designed to make him grateful rather than suspicious. But Corey had spent too many years seeing through lies to fall for it now. He drove to his office and pulled up the surveillance system he'd had installed around their house 6 months earlier. Officially, it was for security. Unofficially, Corey Nixon trusted no one completely, a habit that was about to save his life. The footage from the past 3 weeks revealed a pattern that made his stomach churn. Jeanette meeting with a man Corey didn't recognize at coffee shops across town. Donna Tyler making frequent visits when Corey was out of town on cases. Most damning of all, a clear shot of Jeanette and the unknown man kissing passionately in Corey's own driveway while he'd been in Chicago on a missing persons case. But it was the timestamp on the final video that sealed his wife's fate. Yesterday afternoon, 3 hours before Myra's party, showing Jeanette and the stranger entering the house with Myra, then leaving 20 minutes later without her. Myra never made it to any party. Corey recognized the look in the man's eyes from the surveillance footage. He'd seen it in war zones and crime scenes, the cold satisfaction of someone who enjoyed inflicting pain. This wasn't just about adultery. This was about something much darker. He ran the stranger's license plate through his contacts at the DMV. The name that came back made his blood run cold. Joel Walsh, recently released from a 7-year stint in federal prison for charges involving exploitation of minors. Corey closed his laptop and walked to his office safe. Inside, among the usual documents and emergency cash, was a .45 caliber pistol he'd hoped never to use again. Next to it was a small black notebook containing contact information for men who, like him, had learned in the military that some problems required permanent solutions. He thought about Myra, probably confused and traumatized, wondering why her father hadn't come save her immediately. He thought about the years of marriage to a woman who could orchestrate her own daughter's abuse for whatever sick game she was playing. Most of all, he thought about the promise he'd made to himself long ago. Anyone who betrayed his trust didn't get a second chance. They didn't get to explain, apologize, or make amends. They simply ceased to exist. But first, he needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal. Jeanette and Joel Walsh had made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed they were dealing with a naive husband who would never see through their manipulation. They were about to learn that Corey Nixon had never been naive about anything. Chapter 3. The Depth of Betrayal. Corey spent the next 48 hours constructing a web of surveillance that would have impressed federal agents. Using equipment from his PI business and contacts from his military days, he turned his own home into a monitoring station while maintaining the facade of a worried father waiting for his daughter's recovery. Myra came home Tuesday evening, quiet and withdrawn, but physically unharmed. Corey held her close, noting the way she flinched when Jeanette approached and how she kept looking at the doors as if planning escape routes. His daughter was traumatized, but alive, and she was the key to understanding what had really happened. That night, after Jeanette had gone to bed, early claiming exhaustion, Corey sat with Myra in her room. "Sweetheart, I need you to tell me exactly what happened at the party. All of it." Myra's eyes filled with tears. "There wasn't really a party, Dad. Mom drove me to this house, and there was this man there. He was scary, and he kept asking me questions about you, about your work, your clients, where you keep your files." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about a simple affair. This was about Corey's business, his cases, his clients, many of whom were wealthy individuals going through messy divorces with secrets worth killing for. "What kind of questions, baby?" "He wanted to know about the papers in your office, especially anything about Mr. Randall Steele. Mom told him you've been working on something big, something that could make us rich." Myra wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "When I said I didn't know anything, he got angry. Mom told him to put me in the shed until you came looking for me, and then they would... What would they do, Myra?" "They said they would hurt you, Dad. Really hurt you. And then the man would take over your business, and Mom would get all the money from your clients." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom said you were stupid and that she never loved you anyway." Corey's vision went red for a moment, but he forced himself to stay calm for his daughter's sake. The plan was becoming clear. Stage a crisis with Myra to get Corey emotional and off balance. Then use his distracted state to either kill him or frame him for something that would destroy his business and reputation. Meanwhile, Jeanette would play the grieving widow and inherit everything he'd built. The Randall Steele case was worth $50 million in assets. Corey had uncovered evidence that Steele's wife was hiding money in offshore accounts, information that could swing the divorce settlement dramatically. If someone could get access to that evidence and sell it to the highest bidder. "Myra, I need you to do something for me, and it's very important. Can you be brave?" She nodded, though her lower lip trembled. "I'm going to send you to stay with Uncle Bruce for a few days. You remember him from the barbecues? He's going to keep you safe while I take care of some business. But you can't tell Mom where you're going, and you can't tell her we talked about any of this. Can you do that?" Bruce Eastman wasn't actually Corey's brother, but they'd served together in Afghanistan and had maintained the kind of bond that transcended blood. More importantly, Bruce specialized in personal security and wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who threatened someone under his protection. The next morning, Corey implemented the first phase of his counterplan. While Jeanette was at her real estate office, he transferred Myra to Bruce's secure compound upstate, telling his wife that their daughter was staying with his fictional sister for psychological counseling after her trauma. Jeanette's reaction told him everything. Instead of insisting on knowing which therapist or demanding to speak with his sister she'd never heard of, she simply nodded and said she thought it was probably for the best. That afternoon, Corey received a text from an unknown number. Your daughter's safe, but not for long. We have what we need from your office. Time to retire, old man. They made their move too early. While they thought Myra was still within their reach, she was actually 200 miles away with a man who'd killed Taliban fighters with his bare hands. While they thought they'd gained access to his office, they'd actually accessed a decoy system Corey had set up years ago for exactly this scenario. But most importantly, they'd revealed that there were more people involved than just Jeanette and Joel Walsh. Corey opened his laptop and began typing a message to 5 very specific contacts from his military days. Men who, like him, had been permanently changed by war and had found civilian life lacking in meaningful purpose. Men who would relish the opportunity to apply their unique skills to a personal matter for their old commander. By sunset, Herbert Lloyd was positioned across the street from Joel Walsh's apartment with a sniper rifle. Francisco Huber was monitoring Donna Tyler's house with recording equipment that could pick up conversations through walls. Vernon Lord had taken a job as a maintenance worker at Jeanette's real estate office, giving him access to her computer and phone records. And Corey himself was preparing for the final phase of a plan that would ensure none of his betrayers lived to enjoy their victory. He thought about the man he'd been before war, had stripped away his illusions about human nature. That man might have tried to reason with his wife, might have sought therapy or mediation or legal remedies. But that man had died in an Afghan cave when his own commanding officer had tried to sell him and his team to insurgents for drug money. The man who'd emerged from that betrayal understood that some people were simply predators who would never stop hunting until they were permanently stopped. Jeanette Harrell Nixon, Joel Walsh, and anyone else involved in this conspiracy had made the same mistake as his former CEO. They'd assumed Corey's loyalty made him weak, that his love for his family made him vulnerable. Tomorrow, they would learn that a predator's greatest strength was the ability to make his enemies believe he was prey. Chapter 4. The Hunter's Past. 20 years ago, Staff Sergeant Corey Nixon had learned the most important lesson of his life while bleeding out in a Taliban cave, listening to his commanding officer negotiate the sale of his team's location for 2 kilograms of heroin. The betrayal hadn't just cost him 3 of his closest friends. It had taught him that the capacity for evil existed in everyone, hidden behind masks of love, loyalty, and friendship. When he'd finally escaped and systematically eliminated every person involved in that betrayal, from the CEO to the Afghan middleman to the stateside dealer who'd facilitated the transaction, he'd made himself a promise. Never again would he be the victim. Now, sitting in his office at 3 a.m. while his wife slept peacefully in their bed, Corey allowed himself to remember the skills that had kept him alive when the world went dark. The army had trained him to be efficient, but Afghanistan had made him ruthless. The difference between a soldier and a predator wasn't about rules of engagement. It was about accepting that some threats required permanent solutions. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Herbert Lloyd. Package acquired. Walsh meeting unknown female, apartment 4B. Recommend immediate escalation. Corey pulled up the surveillance feed. Herbert was streaming from his position. The unknown female was a brunette in her 30s, someone Corey didn't recognize, but whose body language suggested familiarity with violence. She moved like a professional, military or law enforcement background, possibly private security. Another player in the game. The conspiracy was larger than he'd initially calculated. A second message arrived from Francisco Huber, mother-in-law hosting strategy session. 3 additional males present. Heavy hardware visible. This is bigger than family drama, boss. Corey felt the familiar calm that had once made him legendary among special operations units. The more complex the threat, the more methodical his response became. Emotion was a luxury for people who fought fair battles. Corey had learned long ago that survival required embracing the darkness that civilized people pretended didn't exist. He opened his secure laptop and began accessing resources he'd hoped never to use again. Swiss bank accounts containing funds from his government work that had never been officially reported. Contact lists of mercenaries, weapons dealers, and information brokers who operated in the spaces between legal and illegal. Most importantly, the detailed psychological profiles he'd compiled on everyone in his life over the past 15 years, including his wife. Jeanette's profile made for disturbing reading. A woman with narcissistic tendencies who'd been attracted to his military record not for the heroism, but for the danger it represented. Someone who collected secrets and had an unusual fascination with true crime documentaries featuring manipulative women. Most tellingly, someone who'd asked far too many specific questions about his military service and his current clients over the years. He dismissed it as curiosity. Now he realized she'd been building a database for exactly this kind of operation. The psychological assessment he'd done on Donna Tyler was equally revealing. A woman with gambling debts and a history of questionable financial decisions who'd been unusually interested in Corey's business success. Someone who'd repeatedly suggested that Jeanette deserved better and who'd made subtle comments about the dangerous nature of Corey's work. Both women had been preparing for this betrayal for years, possibly from the beginning of his marriage. At 4 a.m., Corey received a call from an unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, then listened to a recording that confirmed his worst suspicions. "Nixon, this is your last warning. We have your daughter, we have your files, and we have enough evidence to destroy your reputation permanently. Transfer $5 million to the account number we'll send you. Disappear quietly, and maybe your family lives through this. Refuse, and we start sending pieces of the little girl to your office." They were amateurs. Real professionals never made threats. They simply acted. The fact that they were trying to negotiate told Corey they were overconfident and underprepared for the level of response they triggered. He called Bruce Eastman's secure line. Status report. Package is secure and asking for her daddy. She's scared but unharmed. Want me to put her on the line? Negative. Maintain security protocols. I'll be wrapping this up within 72 hours. Roger that. And Corey? The little one mentioned something about Mom bringing strange men to the house even before this Joel character. Might want to check your surveillance archives. After hanging up, Corey spent the next hour reviewing months of surveillance footage he'd previously skimmed. The pattern was clear. Jeanette had been hosting meetings with various men for over 6 months, always when Corey was out of town. Some faces he recognized from wanted posters in his files. Contract killers, information brokers, and thieves who specialized in high-value targets. His wife had been planning this betrayal for months, possibly years. She'd been using their home as a headquarters for a criminal enterprise that targeted wealthy divorce clients and their investigators. The depth of the betrayal was actually liberating. It meant Corey could respond without moral complexity or emotional conflict. These weren't misguided family members who'd made poor choices. They were career criminals who'd made the fatal mistake of targeting someone with the skills and resources to fight back. By dawn, Corey had assembled a complete picture of the conspiracy and the personnel he'd need to eliminate it. Joel Walsh was the muscle and the connection to organized crime. Donna Tyler was the inside information source and the financial coordinator. The unknown brunette was likely the operational planner, someone with tactical experience who designed the kidnapping and extortion scheme. And Jeanette was the mastermind, the spider at the center of a web that had been years in the making. Corey opened his weapons safe and began selecting equipment for what would be his final family reunion. The .45 pistol was reliable but limited. The tactical knife was silent but required close proximity. The explosives were thorough but indiscriminate. For this job, he needed something that would send a message to anyone else who might consider targeting his family. Precision, efficiency, and absolute finality. He selected 3 items that would serve his purposes perfectly: a combat shotgun for close-quarters work, a suppressed rifle for distance elimination, and a small device that would ensure none of his targets ever hurt another family. 20 years ago, he'd learned that betrayal was the one crime that required the death penalty. Tomorrow, he would teach that lesson to his wife and her accomplices. The hunter was done pretending to be prey. Chapter 5. Setting the Trap. Wednesday morning, Corey Nixon began the performance of his life. He called his wife at her office, his voice carefully crafted to sound defeated and panicked. "Jeanette," they called again. "They want $5 million by Friday or... God, I can't even say it. They have pictures of Myra, and they're threatening too." He let his voice break convincingly. "Oh, honey, Jeanette's voice was perfectly pitched between concern and satisfaction. Maybe we should just pay them. Your business is worth more than that, right? We could liquidate some assets, use the emergency accounts. I don't have that kind of liquid cash. The business is worth it, but everything's tied up in investments and client trust accounts. I'd have to— Corey paused, as if the idea was just occurring to him. I'd have to access the Steelcase files. There's information there worth 10 times what they're asking. The silence on the other end told him everything. Jeanette was probably signaling to someone, confirming that their plan was working. If that's what it takes to save our daughter, she said finally. Do whatever you have to do. After hanging up, Corey spent the morning constructing an elaborate deception. He created false financial documents showing massive debts and liquidity problems. He prepared dummy files for the Steelcase that contained enough real information to seem authentic, but nothing that would actually harm his client. Most importantly, he set up a meeting location that would serve as the perfect killing ground. The abandoned Riverside warehouse on the outskirts of town had been the site of one of his first cases as a private investigator. A missing persons job that had ended with him discovering a human trafficking ring. The building had been condemned afterward, but Corey had maintained access through a contact in the city planning office. More importantly, he'd spent 3 years using it as a training facility, memorizing every sightline, every hiding spot, every tactical advantage it offered. At 2 p.m., he called the number the kidnappers had provided. I have what you want. Riverside Warehouse, Building C, tonight at midnight. Come alone, or I burn everything and disappear. Joel Walsh's voice was cocky and confident. You're not in a position to make demands, old man. We'll come with enough firepower to level that building if we have to. Bring an army if it makes you feel safer. Just remember, if anything happens to me, the real Steel files get delivered to the FBI automatically. Your choice. After hanging up, Corey spent the afternoon turning the warehouse into a tactical maze. Herbert Lloyd positioned himself in the water tower half a mile away with a Barrett .50 caliber rifle and night vision scope. Francisco Huber set up motion sensors and remote cameras throughout the building complex. Vernon Lord planted listening devices and small explosive charges at strategic locations. But Corey's most important preparation was psychological. He called Jeanette one final time, his voice breaking with manufactured despair. They agreed to the exchange. I'm meeting them tonight with everything, the files, the account information, everything we've built together. If this goes wrong— It won't go wrong, Jeanette interrupted, dropping her act for just a moment. Just do what they say and come home safe. The slip confirmed what Corey had suspected. Jeanette knew exactly how the evening would unfold because she'd helped plan it. At 11 p.m., Corey arrived at the warehouse, carrying a briefcase that appeared to contain documents and a laptop. In reality, it held a small arsenal and enough plastic explosive to bring down the entire building if necessary. The first sign that his enemies had underestimated him came when Herbert's voice crackled through his earpiece. Boss, we've got 12 hostiles approaching from 3 directions. Military formation, automatic weapons, night vision gear. These aren't street thugs. Copy that. Positions: 2 teams of 4 flanking east and west. 1 team of 4 coming through the main entrance. Unknown female in tactical gear leading the western team. Corey smiled in the darkness. They'd brought enough firepower to eliminate a small army, which meant they'd never intended for him to survive the exchange. They wanted the files, the money, and the insurance payout from his death. Vernon, Francisco, initiate Phase 1. The warehouse suddenly blazed with floodlights that had been connected to a backup generator. The attacking teams immediately went defensive, seeking cover and regrouping. But in the few seconds they'd been blinded and disoriented, Corey had disappeared into the building's interior. His voice echoed through speakers he'd positioned throughout the complex. Joel Walsh, Federal Prison Number 47,821-198. Served 7 years for trafficking minors across state lines. Donna Tyler, current gambling debt approximately $300,000 to organizations that don't accept late payments. Jeanette Harrell Nixon, maiden name Jeanette Harrell, No known previous marriages despite claiming her first husband died in Iraq. The suite door was unlocked. Jeanette's first mistake of the morning. She was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, still wearing the black dress she'd chosen for her widow's performance. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who believed she'd won. "Hello, Jeanette." She spun around, her face cycling through shock, confusion, and fear before settling on a mask of relief, so convincing it would have fooled anyone who didn't know her true nature. "Corey, thank God you're safe. I was so worried when you didn't come home. What happened? Did they hurt our baby?" "Our baby is fine. She's somewhere you'll never find her, being protected by people who actually care about her welfare." Something in his tone made Jeanette step backward. "What do you mean? Where is she?" "Corey, you're scaring me." "Am I?" Corey moved into the suite's living area, noting the packed suitcases by the door and the forged passport on the coffee table. "You seem to have been preparing for a trip. Going somewhere. I thought if those people came looking for us, we might need to disappear for a while. Just until this whole thing blows over." Corey picked up the passport, which bore Jeanette's photo but the name Rebecca Walsh, Joel's sister, according to the family information he'd extracted from Catherine Norton. "Interesting choice of alias. Though I suppose it makes sense, considering you've been planning this with Joel for months." Jeanette's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "How much do you know?" "Everything. I know about the meetings in our house while I was out of town. I know about the surveillance you've been conducting on my clients. I know about the insurance policy you took out on me 3 months ago. I know you deliberately put our daughter in danger to manipulate me into a vulnerable position. She was never in real danger. She was traumatized and brutalized by your associates. That makes it real danger, regardless of your intentions." Jeanette moved toward the window, perhaps calculating whether the balcony offered an escape route. "You don't understand. This wasn't personal. This was business. You have access to information worth millions of dollars, and you were too naive to monetize it properly. So you decided to kill me and take it. I decided to set us up for life. The divorce business is lucrative, Corey. Wealthy people will pay enormous sums to get leverage over their spouses. Your client files are worth more than your little detective agency could earn in decades." Corey felt the familiar calm that preceded violence. "And our marriage? Our family? Was any of it real?" Jeanette laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "You were a means to an end from the beginning. A damaged military veteran with useful skills and no family connections to complicate things. Perfect for what I needed. What you needed was a victim. What you got was a predator who was better at this game than you are. Where are Joel and the others?" "Dead. All of them. I spent the night eliminating every person involved in the conspiracy against my family." Jeanette's face went pale. "You're lying. Joel was a professional. Catherine Norton was ex-military intelligence. They had backup plans. They underestimated their target, just like you did." Corey drew the suppressed pistol in one fluid motion, holding it steady as Jeanette backed against the window. "You can't kill me, Corey. I'm your wife. You love me. I love the person I thought you were. That person never existed. What you are is a predator who used my daughter as bait to set up my murder. What you are is a cancer that I'm about to cut out of my family's life permanently." "Wait." Jeanette's voice was desperate now. "The money. There's $8 million in accounts Joel set up. Untraceable funds from previous jobs. I can give you the access codes. We can disappear together, start over somewhere else. I don't want her blood money. I want you dead. Think about Myra. She needs her mother. You can't make her an orphan over this." The mention of his daughter made Corey's finger tighten on the trigger. Myra needs protection from predators who would use her as a weapon. That includes her mother. I gave birth to her. I raised her. You can't just. You tortured her to manipulate me. You were willing to let strange men hurt her to further your scheme. You stopped being her mother the moment you chose money over her safety. Jeanette made a desperate lunge for her purse, which likely contained a weapon of her own. Corey's first shot took her in the shoulder, spinning her around and slamming her against the window. The second shot was center mass, dropping her to the floor. As she lay dying, Jeanette looked up at him with eyes full of hatred rather than remorse. You think you've won? There are others, people who know about your clients. This isn't over. Yes, it is. The final shot was a mercy she didn't deserve, but that Corey gave her anyway. He spent the next hour eliminating all evidence of his presence in the suite. The hotel's security cameras had been disabled by Vernon Lord the previous evening. The keycard Jeanette had used was registered to one of her aliases. The forensic evidence would suggest a falling out among criminals rather than a domestic homicide. By the time Corey left the Riverside Hotel, Jeanette Harrell Nixon had become just another casualty in what the media would later describe as a turf war between organized crime groups. Her mother, Donna Tyler, would be found dead in her home that afternoon, the victim of an apparent heart attack brought on by stress. The conspiracy against the Nixon family had been permanently resolved with the kind of efficiency that left no loose ends and no surviving threats. Corey drove toward Bruce Eastman's compound to collect his daughter, his mind already focused on the future rather than the past. Myra would need therapy to deal with her trauma, but she would recover surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her welfare. The predators who tried to destroy his family were dead. The threats had been neutralized. The hunter had protected his territory and eliminated every challenge to his pack. For the first time in weeks, Corey Nixon felt at peace. Chapter 8. Cleaning House. 3 days after Jeanette's death, Corey Nixon sat across for Detective Leonard Hood in the Westfield Police Department's interview room. The conversation was a formality. Hood had been one of Corey's contacts in law enforcement for years, and both men understood the game being played. "Terrible thing about your wife," Hood said, sliding a coffee across the table. "Hotel security footage shows her meeting with known criminals in the days before her death. Looks like she got involved with some dangerous people." "I had no idea," Corey replied, his grief perfectly performed. "Jeanette had been acting strangely lately, but I thought it was stress from work. If I'd known she was in danger." These organized crime types don't leave witnesses. The whole crew got eliminated. Joel Walsh, Catherine Norton, even your mother-in-law. Professional job, probably a rival gang, cleaning house. Corey nodded sadly. "At least Myra wasn't here to see any of this. I sent her to stay with family upstate when I realized something was wrong." The last piece of information he discovered just hours earlier. His wife had never been married before, which meant her tragic backstory about losing her first love to war had been complete fabrication designed to manipulate his protective instincts. "Unknown female operator," Corey continued. "Facial recognition identifies you as Catherine Norton, former Army intelligence officer dishonorably discharged for selling classified information. Current warrant outstanding in Virginia for murder of a federal judge." He paused, letting the implication sink in. "You came here expecting to rob and murder a naive civilian. Instead, you've walked into a prepared battlefield against someone who's killed more enemy combatants than all of you combined." Joel Walsh's voice came through a bullhorn. "We have her daughter, Nixon. Surrender now, or—" "No, you don't." Corey's voice was calm and certain. "My daughter is 200 miles away with a man who's killed Taliban commanders with his bare hands. What you have is a half-baked plan and about 30 seconds before I start reducing your numbers." The first explosive charge detonated near the Eastern team's position. Vernon had placed it perfectly, close enough to disorient and injure, but not close enough to kill immediately. Corey wanted them alive for the next phase of his plan. As the smoke cleared and the remaining attackers regrouped, Corey's voice echoed through the darkness one final time. "You made one crucial mistake. You assumed that someone who loved his family was weak. You're about to learn that a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous predator on Earth." The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Predator Revealed. The first kill came at 12:17 a.m., when Francisco Huber's expertise with explosives eliminated 2 of the Eastern assault team members who'd taken cover behind what they'd assumed was a solid concrete barrier. The shaped charge he'd planted there earlier turned their shelter into shrapnel that painted the warehouse floor. Catherine Norton's voice crackled over their communication system. "Abort and regroup. This is a trap." But Corey had anticipated their retreat routes. As the surviving team members fell back toward their vehicles, they found their path blocked by Herbert Lloyd's precision shooting from the water tower. The .50 caliber rounds didn't just stop their advance. They eliminated cover and concealment with devastating efficiency. "You can run," Corey's voice echoed through the darkness, "but you can't escape. And you can't call for backup because Vernon's been jamming your communications for the past hour." Joel Walsh broke cover, firing wildly into the warehouse interior. "Come out and fight like a man, you coward." Corey materialized from the shadows like a nightmare given form. His combat shotgun spoke once, and Walsh's left kneecap disintegrated. The man collapsed, screaming, but very much alive. Fighting like a man would imply you deserve that level of respect. Corey's voice was conversational as he approached the wounded kidnapper. "But you torture children for money. That makes you something less than human." The second shot removed Walsh's right elbow. The third shattered his left ankle. "Where's my wife?" Through his agony, Walsh gasped out an address. Riverside Hotel, penthouse suite. She's waiting for confirmation." "Confirmation of what?" "Your death, insurance, $2 million policy." Corey nodded and put the final shot through Walsh's forehead. He learned in Afghanistan that mercy was a luxury that got good people killed. The remaining attackers lasted another 15 minutes. Catherine Norton proved to be professionally competent, but ultimately outmatched by Corey's preparation and his team's superior positioning. When the warehouse finally fell silent, 6 bodies lay scattered across the concrete floor, and 3 wounded survivors were secured with zip ties. "Boss," Herbert's voice came through the earpiece. "Police and fire response approximately 10 minutes out." Someone called in the explosions. Corey had anticipated this as well. "Vernon, initiate cleanup protocol." "Francisco, prep the survivors for transport." The cleanup protocol was a system Corey had developed during his early days as a private investigator, when he'd occasionally needed to make evidence disappear. Industrial acid would eliminate DNA evidence. Thermite charges would destroy electronic devices, and strategic placement of accelerants would ensure any remaining evidence was consumed by fire. But the 3 survivors were transported to a secondary location, an abandoned mine shaft 40 miles outside the city. Corey needed information about the full scope of the conspiracy before he eliminated the remaining threats. 2 hours later, Catherine Norton was secured to a chair in the mine's main chamber, her professional composure finally cracking under the weight of her situation. "Your wife hired me 6 months ago," she admitted. "Said she needed help eliminating a dangerous husband who was becoming suspicious. The plan was to stage a kidnapping, get access to your client files, liquidate your assets, and make your death look like retaliation from one of your cases." "Who else was involved?" "Just us. Jeanette, her mother, Walsh, and me. Your wife said you were paranoid, but predictable, that you'd respond exactly like a concerned father when your daughter was threatened." Corey absorbed this information while cleaning his weapons. She was right. I did respond like a concerned father. I eliminated every threat to my child's safety. She's waiting for confirmation that you're dead. When Walsh doesn't report in, she'll assume the plan failed and try to disappear. "No," Corey said quietly. "She won't run. She's too arrogant to believe she can lose to someone she's been manipulating for 15 years. She'll wait for dawn, then go to the warehouse to see what went wrong." Catherine Norton's eyes widened as she realized the implications. "You're going to kill your own wife." "Jeanette stopped being my wife the moment she orchestrated an attack on my daughter. Now, she's just another predator that needs to be eliminated." The mine shaft was deep enough that the sounds wouldn't carry to the surface. When Corey emerged 2 hours later, the conspiracy against his family had been permanently resolved, and the location of several $1 million in stolen assets had been recovered. Dawn was breaking as he drove back toward the city. His phone contained a text message from Jeanette. "Haven't heard from you. Getting worried. Call me when you get this." Corey smiled and typed back. "Everything went perfectly. Coming home soon. Love you." It would be the last lie he ever told his wife. When he arrived at the Riverside Hotel penthouse suite, Jeanette Harrell Nixon would finally meet the man she'd married. Not the gentle father and husband she'd been manipulating, but the predator who'd survived Afghanistan and eliminated every threat to his family's safety. The woman who'd spent months planning his destruction was about to learn that some betrayals carried a death sentence. Chapter 7. The Final Confrontation. At 6:43 a.m., Corey Nixon stood in the elevator of the Riverside Hotel, ascending to the penthouse suite where his wife waited for confirmation of his death. He'd cleaned the blood from his hands and changed into fresh clothes, but the tactical knife remained strapped to his thigh and the suppressed pistol was tucked against his spine. Smart move. Kids don't need to be exposed to this kind of violence. Hood closed the file. We're classifying this as gang-related homicides. No family involvement suspected. Insurance companies might drag their feet on the life insurance payout, but that's standard procedure. After leaving the police station, Corey drove to his office to begin the process of rebuilding his life. His business had already received 3 new high-profile cases in the past week. Word traveled fast in certain circles that Corey Nixon was someone who could handle situations that required discretion and permanent solutions. The Randall Steele case had concluded successfully, with Corey's client receiving a settlement worth $47 million. Steele's gratitude had come in the form of a generous bonus and referrals to other wealthy individuals who valued privacy and results above legal niceties. But Corey's most important business was personal. He spent the afternoon reviewing financial records and legal documents, ensuring that his wife's death would result in the clean transfer of all assets to himself and Myra. Jeanette's debts, including the gambling obligations her mother had accumulated, would die with her, leaving no complications for his daughter's future. At sunset, he drove to Bruce Eastman's compound to collect Myra. She ran to him the moment he arrived, her small arms wrapping around his waist with desperate strength. "Daddy, I missed you so much. Is Mommy really dead?" "Yes, sweetheart. Some very bad people hurt her, but they can't hurt anyone else now." Myra was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the resilience that children sometimes displayed in the face of trauma. "Are you sad?" Corey considered the question carefully. He felt no grief for Jeanette. The woman he'd mourned had been a fiction, a carefully constructed mask designed to manipulate his emotions. What he felt was relief that the threat to his daughter had been permanently eliminated, and satisfaction that justice had been served to those who'd betrayed his trust. But Myra needed a father who could help her process complex emotions, not a predator who saw the world in terms of threats and targets. "I'm sad that you lost your mother," he said finally. "And I'm angry that bad people try to hurt our family. But I'm grateful that you're safe, and I'm proud that you were brave when things got scary." That night, in the guest room at Bruce's compound, Corey tucked his daughter in a bed and answered her questions about what would happen next. "Will we move away from Westfield? Would you like to?" "I don't want to go back to that house. It doesn't feel safe anymore." Corey understood. The house where Jeanette had hosted criminal meetings and planned his murder would never feel like home to either of them. "We'll find a new place, somewhere with better security and room for you to grow up safely." "Will Uncle Bruce come with us?" "If you'd like him to." Uncle Bruce and some of his friends are very good at keeping families safe from bad people. Myra nodded sleepily. "I like Uncle Bruce. He taught me how to throw knives today." "Did he now?" Corey smiled despite himself. Bruce's idea of appropriate child development was unconventional but effective. A daughter who could defend herself would never be helpless against predators. "Daddy, the bad people who hurt Mommy, they can't come back, right?" "No, sweetheart. They can never come back. I made sure of that." 3 months later, Corey and Myra Nixon settled into a sprawling ranch house in rural Montana, 2 hours from the nearest city and surrounded by land that offered clear sight lines in all directions. Bruce Eastman and his security team maintained a compound on the adjacent property, providing both companionship and protection. The house was equipped with military-grade security systems, reinforced safe rooms, and enough weaponry to repel a small army. Myra's bedroom had 2 exits and bulletproof windows. The property had underground bunkers stocked with enough supplies to survive a siege. To visiting social workers and school officials, it looked like the home of a concerned father who'd taken reasonable precautions after his family had been targeted by criminals. In reality, it was a fortress designed by a man who understood that predators would always exist and that the only reliable protection was the capacity for overwhelming retaliation. Myra adapted to their new life with remarkable resilience. She excelled in her new school, made friends with the children of Bruce's team, and began training in self-defense techniques that would serve her well if she ever faced another threat. Most importantly, she never asked about the details of her mother's death or expressed any desire to return to their old life. Children were remarkably good at recognizing genuine safety, and Myra instinctively understood that her father had eliminated the dangers that had threatened their family. The nightmares stopped after 6 months. The hypervigilance faded after a year. By her 14th birthday, Myra Nixon was a confident, capable young woman who could field strip a rifle, detect surveillance, and disappear into wilderness terrain if necessary. She was also happy, loved, and protected by people who would kill anyone who threatened her welfare. Chapter 9. The Price of Betrayal. 5 years after the events that destroyed his first family, Corey Nixon stood on the deck of his Montana ranch, watching his 17-year-old daughter practice tactical driving with Bruce Eastman. Myra had grown into a formidable young woman, intelligent, confident, and lethal when necessary. More importantly, she was happy and secure in ways that would have been impossible if he'd chosen forgiveness over justice. The notification on his encrypted phone broke his contemplation. Vernon Lord's message was brief. Package delivered. Problem resolved. The problem had been Frank Dixon, a former associate of Jeanette's who'd recently been released from federal prison and had made the mistake of trying to contact Myra through social media. Dixon had apparently believed that enough time had passed for him to safely approach the Nixon family about unfinished business related to his deceased partners. Vernon's solution had been characteristically efficient. Dixon's death would be attributed to a prison rivalry that had followed him into civilian life. No connection to the Nixon family, no loose ends, no future complications. It was the 7th such resolution in 5 years. Word had spread through certain criminal networks that Corey Nixon's family was permanently off-limits, but occasionally someone would test that boundary. Each test resulted in swift, brutal elimination that reinforced the message. Betraying the Nixon family was a capital offense. "Dad, watch this." Myra's voice carried across the practice course as she executed a perfect J-turn at 40 miles per hour, her Mustang sliding sideways before straightening out with military precision. Corey smiled and applauded. His daughter had inherited his tactical instincts and his capacity for controlled violence, but she'd also developed the emotional intelligence and moral compass that his own upbringing had failed to provide. She would never be a victim, but she would also never become the kind of predator who targeted innocents. That evening, over dinner at the ranch house, Bruce raised the subject that had been on everyone's mind for months. The girl's ready for college, Corey. MIT accepted her early admission application. Full scholarship for computer science and cybersecurity. Myra looked between the two men, sensing the undercurrent of their conversation. "You're worried about me being away from the compound. College campuses aren't secure environments," Corey said carefully. "Lots of unknown variables, limited control over access and surveillance. Dad, I can't live in a fortress forever, and MIT has one of the best cybersecurity programs in the world. I want to learn how to protect people the way you've protected me." The conversation continued for hours, covering security protocols, communication procedures, and contingency plans. By the end of the evening, they developed a framework that would allow Myra to attend college while maintaining the safety measures that had kept her alive and free from threats. Francisco Huber would relocate to Cambridge and establish a security perimeter around the campus. Herbert Lloyd would provide long-range overwatch from strategic positions in the city. Vernon Lord would handle electronic surveillance and communication security. It was expensive and complex, but Corey had learned that no price was too high to pay for his daughter's safety and future. 2 years later, Myra graduated summa cum laude with dual degrees in computer science and criminal justice. Her senior thesis on digital forensics techniques had been classified by the Department of Homeland Security and resulted in job offers from every major federal law enforcement agency. She chose instead to return to Montana and join her father's private investigation business, which had expanded into a specialized security consulting firm that served high-net-worth individuals and corporations facing complex threats. Nixon Security Solutions employed former military personnel exclusively and had developed a reputation for resolving problems that traditional law enforcement couldn't handle. Their client list was confidential, their methods were effective, and their success rate was 100%. The business thrived because Corey had learned the fundamental truth that most people refuse to acknowledge. In a world full of predators, survival required either accepting victimhood or becoming a more dangerous predator than those who threatened you. On Myra's 21st birthday, father and daughter sat on the same deck where Corey had once watched her practice tactical driving. She was now a full partner in the business, with her own team and her own cases. More importantly, she was alive, successful, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her welfare. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Killing Mom and the others instead of trying to work things out?" Corey considered the question seriously. "Do you remember being scared? Being hurt? Being used as bait to manipulate me? I remember feeling helpless and confused. I remember thinking you might not be able to save me. Your mother was willing to let strangers torture you to further her scheme. She chose money over your safety, criminal associates over family loyalty. That wasn't a marriage problem or a communication issue. That was a fundamental character defect that would have eventually gotten you killed." Myra nodded slowly. "I've studied the psychological profiles you compiled on all of them. Mom scored higher for psychopathy than most serial killers. She wasn't going to change or get better with therapy. Predators don't reform, sweetheart. They just get better at hiding their true nature until they see an opportunity to strike. Your mother had been planning my murder for years, possibly from the beginning of our marriage. The only thing that stopped her from eventually targeting you directly was my intervention. I'm glad you saved me, Dad, and I'm glad you taught me to save myself." That night, as Corey performed his evening security check of the compound, he reflected on the choices that had brought him to this point. He'd lost his first wife to her own criminal nature, but he'd gained a daughter who understood that strength and vigilance were the prices of safety in a dangerous world. The predators who tried to destroy his family were dead and forgotten. The threats that had once kept him awake at night had been permanently eliminated. Most importantly, the people he loved were safe, secure, and capable of defending themselves against whatever dangers the future might bring. Corey Nixon had learned early in life that betrayal was the one crime that demanded the death penalty. He'd applied that lesson ruthlessly and completely, ensuring that no one who threatened his family would live to threaten them again. In the end, it hadn't been about revenge or justice or moral principles. It had been about survival, protection, and the simple truth that some people were too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. The hunter had won. The predators were dead. And the next generation was ready to carry on the tradition of never allowing family to be betrayed without consequences. Standing guard over his territory as he had for 7 years, Corey Nixon felt the deep satisfaction of a man who'd protected what mattered most, no matter the cost. The betrayers were dead. The family survived. Justice had been served. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Deceit. Bryson Hargrove stared at the notification on his phone. Another charge at La Pearl Restaurant. $342.76. The third time this month his wife's credit card had been used there, always on Wednesday afternoons when she claimed to be at her book club. Bryson wasn't supposed to see these notifications, but he'd never removed himself as an authorized user on her account after setting it up years ago. A simple oversight that would prove devastating for Melanie. At 54, Bryson had built his fortune methodically over 3 decades. Starting with a small landscaping business after college, he'd expanded into commercial property development, eventually creating Hargrove Enterprises. People who knew him professionally respected his ruthless efficiency and uncanny foresight. Few knew the pain that had forged him. His childhood in rural Pennsylvania had been defined by abandonment. A father who walked out when he was 7 and a mother who drowned her sorrows in whatever bottle was cheapest. He'd promised himself 2 things early on. He would never depend on anyone, and he would never forgive betrayal. When he met Melanie Westbrook at 30, he'd been immediately captivated by her warmth and seeming authenticity. She'd been different from the social climbers who typically circled him, or so he thought. Their whirlwind romance led to marriage within a year, and children followed soon after. Rachel, now 24, and Preston, 22. For 24 years, Bryson had convinced himself he'd broken the cycle, created the stable family he never had. He'd worked relentlessly, providing a lifestyle few could imagine. The 6-bedroom house in Havenbrook Estates, private schools, luxury vacations, and trust funds. Bryson set his phone down and gazed out the window of his home office. The sprawling garden Melanie had insisted on installing last year, a $175,000 passion project, stretched before him. Had she been entertaining her lover among those carefully arranged flower beds? The thought burned in his chest. His executive assistant, Larissa, knocked gently before entering with a stack of documents. The financial reports for the Westlake property and the updated contracts for the Riverfront Plaza, she said, placing them on his desk. Larissa had been with him for 15 years, the only person who truly understood how he operated. Thank you. Any word from Calvin about the Belridge acquisition? He sent over the preliminary assessment. The hotel is undervalued by at least 20%. It could be a lucrative addition to your portfolio. Bryson nodded. Schedule a meeting for next week. And Larissa, I need you to handle something of a personal nature. She raised an eyebrow, but remained professionally composed. Of course. I need comprehensive surveillance on Melanie. Discreet, thorough, and immediate. Use Thorne. He's expensive, but worth it. If Larissa was surprised, she didn't show it. I'll make the arrangements today. After she left, Bryson opened his safe and removed a leather-bound journal. Inside were handwritten notes documenting every sacrifice he'd made, every milestone in building his empire. He'd started at the day he launched his first business, determined to create a record of his journey from nothing to something. He turned to a blank page and wrote a single line. The day I discovered the price of trust. 3 days later, Thorne delivered a thick envelope to Bryson's office after hours. The photos inside confirmed what he already knew: Melanie and a man named Wade Thornton, a lifestyle coach, who'd moved to town 2 years ago. The timestamps showed regular Wednesday meetings, followed by visits to an upscale apartment complex Bryson didn't recognize. Bryson didn't rage or break down. Instead, he felt a cold clarity wash over him, the same state of mind that had guided his most successful business decisions. He would dismantle this betrayal with the same precision he used to acquire failing businesses and transform them. That night at dinner, he watched Melanie laugh and talk about charity functions as if she hadn't spent the afternoon in another man's bed. Their children were absent, Rachel planning her upcoming wedding in Chicago, Preston at his 2nd year of medical school. Bryson studied his wife's face, memorizing the lines around her eyes, the way her lips curled when she lied. You seem distracted, Melanie said, reaching for her wine glass. Just thinking about the future, Bryson replied, raising his glass. To new beginnings. She smiled, oblivious to the double meaning, and clinked her glass against his. Chapter 2. Mapping the Betrayal. The next morning, Bryson summoned his most trusted lawyer, Harrison Wells, to his office. I need to restructure some assets, Bryson explained, sliding a list across the desk. Quietly and immediately, Harrison scanned the document, his expression remaining neutral. Preparing for something specific. Insurance against predictable disappointments, Bryson replied. I want everything transferred within 2 weeks. Nothing traceable back to me directly. These properties include your family home and most of your visible assets, Harrison noted. Melanie would need to sign off on. She won't be signing anything. These are all holdings she doesn't know exist. For 20 years, Bryson had maintained a parallel portfolio unknown to Melanie or their children. While they enjoyed the fruits of his official success, he quietly acquired properties under shell companies and trusts. It wasn't about tax evasion. He paid every cent he owed, but about maintaining control. And the Belridge Hotel? Harrison asked, noting its absence from a list. That's a separate matter. I'll handle it personally. After Harrison left, Bryson called Larissa. I need everything we have on Wade Thornton. Background, finances, weaknesses. The information arrived that afternoon. Wade Thornton, 48, had reinvented himself multiple times. Failed actor, supplement salesman, mindfulness guru, and now lifestyle coach. He specialized in helping affluent women rediscover their purpose. His business operated on cash payments and private sessions. His client list included 3 divorcees who'd received substantial settlements after leaving long-term marriages. Bryson recognized the pattern immediately. Wade wasn't just sleeping with Melanie. He was methodically preparing her to leave with as much money as possible. That evening, Bryson visited Preston at medical school, taking him to dinner at an upscale restaurant near campus. "How are the studies going?" he asked as they ate. "Brutal, but worth it," Preston replied. "I'm thinking of specializing in orthopedic surgery." Bryson nodded approvingly. "Your mother mentioned you needed additional funds for some special program?" Preston looked confused. "No, I'm fully covered by the trust. Did she say I needed money?" "My mistake," Bryson said smoothly. "Must have misunderstood." Later that night, he checked Melanie's recent bank withdrawals, $50,000 over the past 3 months, all in cash. Money supposedly for Preston's special medical program. Another lie to unravel. The following day, Bryson toured the Belridge Hotel, a once grand establishment that had fallen into disrepair. The owner, eager to sell, highlighted its potential. The wedding venue alone could be revitalized into something spectacular, the owner said, leading him through a ballroom with soaring ceilings. "With your vision, this could be the premier destination for high-end events in the region." Bryson's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Dad, we found the perfect venue for the wedding. The Grand Ballroom at Belridge Hotel. Mom's going to call you about the deposit." He smiled at the coincidence, or perhaps fate, and turned to the owner. "I'll take it. Full asking price, but I have conditions. The sale remains confidential, and I want it completed within 10 days. That night, as Bryson reviewed more surveillance photos, his phone rang. Rachel's voice bubbled with excitement. "Dad, have you talked to Mom? She's being weird about the venue deposit." "I haven't, sweetheart. What's happening?" "We found this amazing place, the Belridge. It's perfect, but needs a deposit by next week to secure the date. Mom was supposed to call you." "I'll handle it," he promised. "How are the other wedding plans coming along?" "Great. Garrett's parents are handling the rehearsal dinner." "Oh, and Mom's been amazing. She and her friend Wade have been helping with all the details." Bryson's grip tightened on the phone. "Wait, yeah, Mom's life coach, or whatever. He knows the owner of this amazing florist and got us a huge discount." After the call, Bryson sat in his darkened office, the pieces falling into place. Wade wasn't just preparing to help Melanie leave. He was ingratiating himself with their daughter, positioning himself as part of the family's future. Bryson opened his journal and wrote, "The parasite has reached the 2nd generation. Extraction must be complete." Chapter 3. The First Countermove. The acquisition of Belridge Hotel was completed in record time, with ownership obscured through a maze of shell companies. Only Harrison and Larissa knew of Bryson's connection to the property. He immediately authorized renovations on the ballroom, ensuring it would be ready for Rachel's wedding date. Melanie continued her Wednesday book club meetings, unaware of Bryson's growing knowledge. He maintained his routine, giving no indication that anything had changed. Each night, he added to his journal, meticulously documenting her lies and his plans. 3 months before the wedding, Bryson implemented the first phase of his strategy. He arranged a meeting with Calvin Reeves, his finance director, and Marcus Bellamy, the bank's relationship manager. "I want to consolidate some accounts," Bryson explained. Specifically, I need to separate the wedding fund from our joint holdings. Marcus nodded. The $175,000 set aside for Rachel's wedding? Easy enough. We'll need Mrs. Hargrove's signature as well. Actually, Bryson slid a document across the table. The original deposit was made solely from my business proceeds. Melanie was added as a courtesy, but legally, those funds remain mine. Calvin confirmed this with documentation, and Marcus reluctantly processed the transfer. Is everything all right, Mr. Hargrove? Marcus asked carefully. Perfect, Bryson assured him. Just preparing for upcoming celebrations. The next day, Bryson met Rachel for lunch. She'd flown in to finalize wedding details with Melanie. How's the planning going? He asked. Great, but Mom's being super controlling. She vetoed my choice of photographer because he doesn't understand her vision. Rachel rolled her eyes. Oh, and she's making this weird seating chart where you're basically hidden behind a column. Bryson kept his expression neutral. I'm sure she has her reasons. Yeah, Wade suggested it would minimize tension if you weren't prominently featured. I told them both that's ridiculous. You're walking me down the aisle, for God's sake. Wade has input on the seating arrangements? Bryson asked mildly. Rachel shrugged. He's been helping Mom with everything. She says he has an artist's eye for these things. She lowered her voice. Between us, I think she might be dating him. They have this weird energy. And how do you feel about that? Honestly, it's awkward. But you and Mom have been like roommates for years, Dad. Everyone's noticed. The comment stung more than Bryson expected. Had he been so focused on providing that he'd failed to notice his marriage hollowing out from within? That evening, Bryson returned home to find Melanie arranging flowers in the kitchen, humming to herself. You seem happy, he observed. Just enjoying the creative process, she replied. Rachel's wedding is coming together beautifully. I spoke with her today. She mentioned Wade has been helping with the arrangements. Melanie's hands faltered slightly. He has excellent taste and connections with vendors. How thoughtful of your life coach to be so involved with our daughter's wedding. He's a friend, Bryson. Something you might understand if you had any interests beyond work. Bryson nodded slowly. Speaking of work, I'll be traveling next week. Business in Chicago. Fine, Melanie said dismissively. Rachel and I have plenty to do without you underfoot. The coldness in her tone confirmed what the photos had suggested. Not just infidelity, but contempt. Bryson added it to his mental ledger of debts to be collected. 2 days later, Bryson was reviewing renovation plans for the Bell Ridge when Larissa entered with an urgent expression. You need to see this, she said, handing him her tablet. On the screen was an email Thorne had intercepted between Melanie and Wade. My love, we will be in Chicago next week. The perfect time to finalize everything. I've spoken with my lawyer about expediting matters once we have the wedding behind us. Rachel still insists on him walking her down the aisle, but I've arranged the seating to minimize his presence after that. The photographer has been instructed to focus on you as the family friend rather than be in group shots. The wedding fund is secure in the joint account. Once R is married, we'll proceed with the next phase. We will never know what hit him until it's too late. Forever yours, M. Bryson read it twice, then set the tablet down. Send Thorne to Chicago. I want him to make my presence there very visible. Then follow Wade while I'm supposedly away. That night, Bryson transferred the wedding fund to his private account, then sent Melanie a screenshot with a simple message. Planning something? His phone rang immediately. Melanie's voice was shrill with panic. What have you done? That money is for Rachel's wedding. Is it? Bryson asked calmly. Because your email suggests it had a different purpose. Silence fell on the line. You've been reading my emails, she finally said, her voice hard. You've been planning to leave me through our daughter's wedding, he countered, while sleeping with a con man who targets wealthy housewives. Wade loves me, she hissed. He sees me as more than a trophy or an accessory to your success. Is that what the money was for? Your new life with Wade? Rachel's wedding will happen with or without your money, Melanie snapped. I've already spoken with my parents. They'll cover it. Bryson laughed softly. Your parents who live on a fixed income? Who regularly ask us for money? That should be interesting. You're a bastard, Bryson. Perhaps. But I'm a bastard who reads the fine print. Check our prenups sometime. Infidelity clauses work both ways. He ended the call and waited. 3 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." Bryson smiled into the darkness of his office. "No, Melanie," he whispered to himself. "You will." Chapter 4. Pawns and Players. The confrontation over the wedding fund marked a turning point. The pretense of normalcy evaporated, replaced by Cold War tactics throughout the house. Melanie moved into the guest bedroom without explanation. Bryson doubled his working hours, returning home only to sleep. Their few interactions were witnessed by the household staff, who whispered among themselves about the tension. Bryson observed Melanie's growing desperation as she made urgent calls to her parents and met with Wade in increasingly public locations. A week after the wedding fund incident, Rachel called Bryson in tears. "Mom says you stole the wedding money. What's going on?" Bryson sighed. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Your mother and I are working through some issues." "What issues?" "Nobody tells me anything. The venue needs payment by Friday, or we lose the date." "The venue will be taken care of," he assured her. "I promise." After calming Rachel, Bryson called the manager of the Bellridge, actually his newly appointed proxy, and arranged for Rachel's date to be secured without payment as a courtesy. That evening, he found Melanie in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables. "I spoke with Rachel," he said. "She's upset." Melanie pointed the knife at him. "Fix it. Give the money back. So you can funnel it to your escape fund?" "I don't think so. This isn't about me. It's about our daughter's wedding." Bryson leaned against the counter. "Interesting how your concern for Rachel only surfaces when your plans are threatened." "You don't know anything," Melanie snapped. "I know Wade Thornton has cleaned out 3 wealthy women in the past 5 years. I know you've withdrawn $50,000 in cash that you claimed was for Preston's education. I know you've been preparing divorce papers with that overpriced attorney in the Westbrook building." Melanie's face paled. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting my interests," Bryson corrected. "Something you clearly stopped caring about long ago." "What do you want?" she asked, her voice suddenly weary. "I want you to remember something," Bryson said quietly. "I built everything we have from nothing. I survived things that would have broken most men. If you think you can take what's mine without consequences, you've forgotten who I am." He left her standing there, knife still in hand, and retreated to his office to make a call. "Harrison, initiate the asset protection protocol we discussed, and contact the Bellridge. I want to make some specific arrangements for the wedding." The next day, Preston arrived home unexpectedly. "Surprise visit," he explained, hugging Bryson in the driveway. "Thought I'd check on wedding plans." Bryson studied his son's face, noting the tension around his eyes. "Rachel called you, didn't she?" Preston sighed. "She said you and Mom are fighting about money, that the wedding might be canceled." "The wedding will happen as planned," Bryson assured him. "Your mother and I are having disagreements about certain arrangements." Inside, Melanie's face lit up at the sight of Preston. She embraced him fiercely, shooting a triumphant look at Bryson over their son's shoulder. Over dinner, the conversation remained superficially normal, though Bryson noted how Melanie repeatedly emphasized her contributions to the children's upbringing. "Your father was always working," she reminded them. "I was the one attending every game, every recital." "Because someone had to earn the money for private schools and luxury vacations," Bryson countered mildly. Preston looked between them, confusion evident. "What's really going on?" "Rachel's freaking out, and you two are sniping at each other." Melanie reached for her wine glass. "Your father is being difficult about the wedding arrangements." "I'm being realistic about finances," Bryson corrected. "And questioning some of your mother's choices." "Like what?" Preston demanded. Bryson met Melanie's gaze across the table. "Like her relationship with Wade Thornton." Silence fell over the dining room. Preston's eyes widened. "The life coach guy? What about him?" "Ask your mother," Bryson suggested. Melanie's knuckles whitened around her glass. "Wade is a friend who's helping with wedding preparations. Your father is imagining things because he can't stand that I have a life outside this house. A life that includes afternoon visits to the Lakeview apartments?" Bryson asked. "Interesting venue for wedding planning." Preston looked between them, comprehension dawning. "Mom, are you seeing this guy?" "This isn't an appropriate conversation," Melanie insisted, standing abruptly. I won't be interrogated in my own home. After she stormed out, Preston turned to Bryson. Is Mom having an affair? Bryson considered his son carefully. Preston had always been more sensitive than Rachel, more attuned to the undercurrents of family dynamics. Yes, Bryson said simply. For at least a year. Preston slumped at his chair. And the wedding fund? Secure, but not accessible to your mother, which has complicated her plans. What plans? To leave after the wedding with as much money as possible. Preston shook his head in disbelief. What are you going to do? Ensure that everyone faces the consequences of their choices, Bryson replied, starting with Mr. Thornton. The next morning, Bryson met Thorne at a cafe downtown. I have something interesting, the investigator said, sliding a folder across the table. Thornton's been meeting with someone beside your wife. The photos showed Wade in deep conversation with Garrett Phillips, Rachel's fiancé. They've met 3 times in the past 2 weeks, Thorne explained. Always in out-of-the-way places, always without your daughter's knowledge. Bryson studied the images. Find out what they're discussing. I want audio if possible. Already working on it. But there's more. Thorne handed over another document. Thornton just put a deposit on a house in Sedona, Arizona. Way beyond his apparent means. Using my money, Bryson murmured. How predictable. 2 days later, Thorne delivered a recording. Wade and Garrett sat in a parked car, their conversation captured clearly. Mrs. Hargrove says he's on to us, Garrett was saying. The wedding fund transfer. Don't worry about it, Wade replied. She has other resources. Once you're married to Rachel, you'll have access to her trust fund. But that doesn't kick in until she's 30. There are ways to access it earlier with the right legal approach. Mrs. Hargrove and I will handle Bryson. You focus on keeping Rachel happy until the wedding. And after, we all get what we deserve. Bryson listened to the recording twice, his expression unchanging. Then he called Harrison. I need Rachel's trust fund restructured immediately. Change the terms. She gets nothing if she divorces within 5 years of marriage. That's unusually restrictive, Harrison cautioned. It's necessary, Bryson replied. And I want ironclad documentation of why these changes were made. Evidence that will hold up in court when she eventually learns about it. Next, he called Rachel directly. Sweetheart, I've resolved the venue situation. It's secured for your date. Really? Mom said her parents had to step in because you were being difficult. Did she? Interesting. Actually, I handled it personally. I'd like to meet with you and Garrett tomorrow to go over some details. Dad, we're swamped with planning. It's important, Rachel. Trust me, the meeting never happened. That night, Melanie confronted Bryson in his office, face flushed with anger. What did you say to Preston? He's barely speaking to me. The truth, Bryson replied calmly. Something in short supply around here lately. You had no right. I had every right. He's my son, and he deserved to know why his family is falling apart. Melanie jabbed a finger at him. You're the one destroying this family with your controlling behavior. You've never supported my independence, my growth. Is that what you call sleeping with Wade Thornton? Growth? He appreciates me. He sees me as a person, not a possession. Bryson laughed coldly. He sees you as an ATM, Melanie. One that's about to run dry. You're wrong about him. And you're wrong if you think you can control Rachel's wedding to punish me. Rachel's wedding will proceed exactly as planned, Bryson assured her. I made certain of it. Melanie studied him suspiciously. What does that mean? It means I've secured the venue. It means the wedding will happen, despite your attempts to use it as leverage. My parents haven't paid a dime, Bryson finished for her. The venue called me directly after your check bounced. This was a calculated lie. There had been no check, but Melanie's reaction confirmed his suspicions. She'd been bluffing about her parents' financial support. Fine, she snapped, but I'm still in charge of the arrangements. Rachel wants me involved, not you. By all means, continue planning. Just understand that I'll be there, front and center, watching my daughter get married. No hidden seating, no minimal photos. Melanie's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. After she left, Bryson received a text from Thorne with a screenshot of a message from Melanie to Wade. He knows more than we thought. Need to accelerate the timeline. Talk to G about moving things forward with R. Once they're married, We proceed immediately. Bryson smiled grimly and added the message to his growing file. The pieces were moving exactly as he'd anticipated. Chapter 5. Shifting Alliances. As the wedding approached, the Hargrove household existed in a state of carefully orchestrated chaos. Melanie threw herself into preparations, constantly on the phone with vendors and making trips to the Bell Ridge to supervise details. She avoided Bryson entirely, communicating through notes left on the kitchen counter or messages relayed through the housekeeper. Preston returned to medical school after a tense week at home, his relationship with Melanie noticeably strained. Rachel remained oblivious to the deeper currents, focused entirely on her rapidly approaching wedding day. Bryson maintained his distance from the planning, allowing Melanie to believe she controlled the process. Meanwhile, he met regularly with the actual management of the Bell Ridge, implementing subtle changes to the venue that would become significant later. 1 month before the wedding, Garrett requested a meeting with Bryson at his office. "I appreciate you making time for me, sir," the young man said, shifting nervously in his chair. "With all the wedding stress, we haven't had much chance to talk." Bryson studied his future son-in-law with clinical detachment. Garrett Phillips, 26, came from modest means but had cultivated an image of success. His investment firm position had been secured through connections rather than merit, a fact Bryson had confirmed through discreet inquiries. "What's on your mind, Garrett?" "I want to discuss Rachel's future, our future together." He cleared his throat. Mrs. Hargrove mentioned there might be some financial arrangements being adjusted before the wedding. "Did she?" Bryson leaned back, expression neutral. "What specifically?" "Something about Rachel's trust fund. Mrs. Hargrove suggested I speak with you directly about ensuring its availability after we're married." The brazenness of the approach almost impressed Bryson. The trust was established when Rachel was born. It matures when she turns 30. Yes, but Mrs. Hargrove mentioned there might be provisions for earlier access in certain circumstances. For housing, education, or a husband's investment opportunities? Bryson suggested mildly. Garrett flushed. "I wouldn't put it that way. But Rachel and I have dreams, plans that require capital." "Fascinating. And when did you start discussing these plans with Wade Thornton?" The color drained from Garrett's face. I don't know what you mean. Let's not waste time, Garrett. I know about your meetings with Wade. I know about Melanie's affair. And I know about the plan to access Rachel's money after the wedding." Garrett swallowed hard. "Mr. Hargrove, there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Bryson interrupted. "But there is an opportunity. For you." "What kind of opportunity?" "To choose the right side of this situation." Bryson slid a folder across the desk. "These are records of Wade Thornton's past. 3 failed marriages, 2 bankruptcies, and several lawsuits from women claiming he defrauded them. Is that the man you want guiding your financial future?" Garrett opened the folder hesitantly, scanning the documents inside. "I didn't know." "Clearly. You also didn't know that I've restructured Rachel's trust. If she divorces within 5 years of marriage, she gets nothing. And neither do you. That's not fair to Rachel." "Perhaps not. But it's protection against predators like Wade and opportunists who might be influenced by them." Garrett closed the folder, his expression conflicted. "What do you want from me?" "Information. A complete account of Wade and Melanie's plans. In return, I'll ensure your financial future with Rachel remains secure, provided your intentions toward my daughter are genuine." "And if I refuse?" Bryson smiled thinly. "Then I share these documents with Rachel before the wedding, including transcripts of your conversations with Wade about accessing her money." The choice was clear. Garrett broke, revealing everything. Wade and Melanie planned to leave immediately after the wedding, using money she'd been siphoning from household accounts. Wade had convinced Melanie that Bryson had hidden millions she was entitled to. Garrett's role was to help them access Rachel's trust fund by claiming they needed it for a house purchase, then funneling a portion back to Melanie and Wade. "They said it was only fair," Garrett finished lamely, "that you've been controlling the family money for years. And you believe them?" "I didn't know what to believe. Mrs. Hargrove was so convincing about how you'd mistreated her." Bryson nodded thoughtfully. "Here's what happens next, Garrett. You'll continue meeting with Wade, but you'll report everything to me. You'll convince him you're still on board with the plan, and you'll keep Rachel completely in the dark. What if I can't do that? What if they suspect? Then you're not the man I thought you were. Bryson stood, signaling the end of the meeting. For Rachel's sake, I hope you're smarter than you've shown so far. After Garrett left, Bryson called Larissa. Arrange a meeting with the Belridge staff. It's time to finalize arrangements for the wedding day. The following weekend, Rachel and Garrett came for dinner. Bryson noted Garrett's nervous glances and Melanie's overly cheerful demeanor. Preston had returned home again, creating a facade of family unity. The final fittings went perfectly, Melanie announced over dessert. And the Belridge staff has been so accommodating with our requests. I'm glad to hear it, Bryson replied. I understand the venue has quite a history. The manager told us it was recently purchased by some investment group, Rachel said. They're renovating everything. We're lucky our wedding falls right after the ballroom restoration is completed. Very fortunate timing, Bryson agreed, catching Melanie's suspicious glance. After dinner, as Rachel showed Preston her wedding portfolio in the living room, Melanie cornered Bryson in the kitchen. What did you say to Garrett? He's been acting strangely since meeting with you. We had a frank discussion about his future with Rachel, Bryson replied. Financial expectations, career prospects, the usual father of the bride concerns. You threatened him. I educated him. There's a difference. Melanie stepped closer, lowering her voice. Listen carefully, Bryson. This wedding is happening exactly as planned. You will not interfere with Rachel's happiness. On that, we agree completely. And after the ceremony, you'll keep your distance during the reception. Wade will be there as my guest, and I won't have you creating a scene. Bryson raised an eyebrow. Bold of you to bring your lover to our daughter's wedding. He's my friend and has been instrumental in the planning. Rachel wants him there. Does she want him in the family photos too? Taking my place. Melanie's expression hardened. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Your pride. You need to control everyone and everything. No, Melanie. It's about loyalty. Something you abandoned the moment Wade Thornton showed interest in your bank accounts. Her hand struck his face with surprising force. You know nothing about what Wade and I have, she hissed. Bryson didn't flinch. I know enough. And soon, so will everyone else. The evening ended with strained goodbyes. As Rachel hugged Bryson, she whispered, Please be nice at the wedding, Dad. For me. I'll be exactly who I need to be, he promised, kissing her forehead. Later that night, Bryson received a text from Garrett. Meeting with W tomorrow. He wants to discuss contingency plans if Rachel resists early trust access. What should I do? Bryson replied. Tell him you found documents suggesting I've changed the trust terms. Act worried, but committed to the plan. The trap was baited. All that remained was to spring it at precisely the right moment. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. 2 weeks before the wedding, tension in the Hargrove household reached unbearable levels. Melanie moved permanently into the guest room, communicating with Bryson only when absolutely necessary. Rachel visited frequently, engrossed in final preparations and oblivious to the undercurrents of hostility. Preston, however, saw everything clearly. He cornered Bryson in his office one evening. This situation is toxic, he stated flatly. Rachel deserves to know what's happening before her wedding. Bryson set aside the document he'd been reviewing. And what exactly would you have me tell her? That her mother is planning to abandon her family the moment the reception ends? That her fiancé was conspiring to access her trust fund? Preston caught the past tense. What did you do, Dad? I gave Garrett a choice. He made the right one. Preston sank into a chair. This is so messed up. Why not just confront Mom publicly? In the charade? Because your sister deserves her wedding day, Bryson said simply. And because some lessons must be learned through consequences, not warnings. That's cold, even for you. Is it? Would Rachel believe me without evidence? Would she thank me for destroying her perfect day with accusations? Sometimes patience is the only path to justice. Preston studied his father's face. You've never forgiven Grandpa for leaving, have you? This is about more than Mom's affair. The observation struck closer than Bryson expected. This is about honoring commitments, he replied carefully. About facing the consequences of betrayal. Just don't hurt Rachel in the process. Whatever Mom's done, Rachel's innocent. I know. Bryson squeezed his son's shoulder. Trust me. The next day, final preparations for the wedding shifted into high gear. Melanie spent hours at the Bell Ridge, obsessing over details while Wade offered his expert guidance. Unbeknownst to them, every change they requested was reported directly to Bryson by the venue staff he secretly employed. 3 days before the wedding, Bryson visited the Bell Ridge himself, touring the renovated ballroom with the manager. Mrs. Hargrove has requested very specific seating arrangements, the manager explained, showing him the floor plan. Your table would be here, partially obscured by the floral installation. Bryson examined the layout. And the head table, here, with the bride and groom, Mrs. Hargrove, and Mr. Thornton at the center. You're positioned at the peripheral table. I see. And who approved this arrangement? Mrs. Hargrove was most insistent. She claimed to have your proxy. Bryson nodded thoughtfully. Make a note of her instructions, but prepare to implement these changes instead. He handed over an alternative seating chart and ensure the staff understands who actually owns this establishment. The night before the rehearsal dinner, Rachel called Bryson in tears. Mom and I had a huge fight, she sobbed. She's insisting Wade sit at the head table as her plus one. I told her it should be just family, and she completely lost it. What exactly did she say? Bryson asked calmly. That I was being selfish and ungrateful after everything she's done for the wedding. That Wade deserves recognition for his contributions. Then she said if I didn't agree, she might not come at all. Can you believe that? My own mother threatening to skip my wedding over seating arrangements. Where are you now? At Garrett's apartment. I can't face her tonight. Get some rest, Bryson advised. I'll handle your mother. When he arrived home, Melanie was pacing in the kitchen, phone in hand. Did you put Rachel up to this? She demanded as soon as he entered. Turning her against Wade? Rachel is capable of making her own judgments, Bryson replied. Apparently, she wants her wedding day to focus on her new marriage, not her mother's affair. It's not an affair. Wade and I have a meaningful relationship that you couldn't possibly understand. A relationship you're flaunting at our daughter's wedding, against her wishes. Melanie slammed her hand on the counter. I've done everything for that wedding. Every detail, every arrangement. Wade has been my support through all of it while you did nothing but criticize. Is that what you tell yourself? That the man pursuing your money has been supportive? That the daughter you're about to abandon should be grateful for your wedding planning expertise? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm finally living for myself after 24 years of living for this family. Bryson stepped closer, his voice dangerously soft. Let me be clear, Melanie. You will not ruin Rachel's wedding with your selfishness. You will respect her wishes regarding seating arrangements, and you will maintain the dignity of this family until the moment the reception ends. Or what? She challenged. Or I will ensure that every guest learns exactly why our marriage is ending. With documentation. Melanie paled slightly, but maintained her defiance. You're bluffing. You wouldn't embarrass Rachel that way. Try me. Bryson turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. When you speak to Wade tonight, remind him that prenuptial agreements work both ways. In the event of infidelity, you leave with what you brought to the marriage. Nothing more. The morning of the rehearsal, Bryson received a text from Garrett. Wade is furious about the seating change. He and M had a huge argument last night. They don't know I overheard, but they're still planning to leave after the reception. W says the old man won't know what hit him. Bryson smiled grimly and replied, keep me updated. The rehearsal proceeded with artificial cordiality. Melanie performed her role as mother of the bride flawlessly, though Bryson noted the strain around her eyes. Wade attended as a wedding coordinator, hovering at the periphery with a clipboard and an air of authority that fooled no one who knew the truth. At the rehearsal dinner, hosted by Garrett's parents at an upscale restaurant, the tension remained palpable beneath the veneer of celebration. Melanie kept her distance from Bryson, focusing her attention on Rachel and the Phillips family. As coffee was served, Rachel clinked her glass for attention. I just want to thank everyone for being here, she said, smiling radiantly. Especially my parents, who have given me everything a daughter could ask for. Dad, I know you and Mom haven't always seen eye to eye on the wedding details, but I'm so grateful you resolved the venue issue. The bell ridge is perfect. Bryson raised his glass in acknowledgement, catching Melanie's suspicious glance. Later, as guests were departing, Melanie cornered him in the restaurant's foyer. "What did you do about the venue?" she demanded in a harsh whisper. "I told you I handled it," Bryson replied mildly. "The Bellridge management and I came to an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" "The kind that ensures our daughter gets the wedding she deserves, despite your attempts to sideline me from the event." Melanie's eyes narrowed. "If you've changed any of my arrangements..." "You'll what, Melanie? Cancel the wedding? Disappoint Rachel? Expose your affair to our friends and family? Think carefully about your next move." Before she could respond, Rachel appeared, wrapping her arms around both of them. "My two favorite people," she said happily. "Promise me you'll both be on your best behavior tomorrow." "Of course, sweetheart," Melanie assured her, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Always," Bryson agreed, returning Rachel's hug. As they walked to their separate cars, Melanie hissed under her breath, "This isn't over, Bryson." "No," he agreed quietly, "but it will be very soon." That night, alone in his study, Bryson received a final report from Thorne. Confirmation of airline tickets to Arizona in Melanie and Wade's names, departing the day after the wedding. The reservation at an exclusive resort. The newly purchased house waiting for them. He added the evidence to his file, then closed it with finality. Everything was prepared for the reckoning that would come with the dawn. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Bryson dressed methodically in his tuxedo, reviewing his plan one final time. As he adjusted his tie, his phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. "Don't even think about showing up to your daughter's wedding," my wife snapped. "You'll ruin the photos. Rachel deserves better in her background." I just smiled, transferred the wedding fund back to my account, and sent her a screenshot. That was just step one. They still don't know I own the venue they bragged about. Bryson stared at the message in confusion before realizing it wasn't meant for him. Melanie had accidentally sent him a message intended for Wade. A message revealing not just their continued plotting, but her intention to bar him from the wedding entirely. He saved the screenshot and sent a single reply. "Message received." Then he called Harrison. "It's time. Implement the final phase." Chapter 7. Hidden Truths Revealed. The Bellridge Hotel gleamed in the morning sunlight, its newly renovated facade a testament to the power of resources properly applied. Guests began arriving shortly before noon, admiring the grandeur of the historic building as they were escorted to the garden ceremony space. Bryson arrived early, greeting the venue staff, his staff, with quiet authority. He toured the ballroom where the reception would be held, confirming that his specific instructions had been implemented. Everything was in place, from the seating arrangement to the special presentation he'd prepared for later. In a private suite, Rachel prepared with her bridesmaids, blissfully focused on her special day. In another wing, Melanie directed vendors with military precision, Wade at her side playing the role of dedicated assistant. Preston found Bryson in the lobby an hour before the ceremony. "Mom's looking for you," he said. "She seems agitated." "I imagine she is," Bryson replied. "She sent me an interesting text this morning." He showed Preston the message. His son's eyes widened as he read. "She actually tried to ban you from the wedding? Your own daughter's wedding. Apparently, I'd ruined the photos." Preston shook his head in disbelief. "What are you going to do?" "Exactly what I planned from the beginning. Ensure that justice is properly served." At that moment, Melanie appeared, resplendent in her mother-of-the-bride gown, but with fury etched across her features. "Where have you been?" she demanded, pulling Bryson aside. "The photographer needs family photos before the ceremony." "I received your message about not showing up," Bryson replied calmly. "I assumed my presence wasn't required." Melanie blanched. "That wasn't. I didn't send it to me by mistake. Clearly. Fortunately, I'm not as easily dismissed as you might hope." She grabbed his arm, lowering her voice. "Listen to me very carefully. Today is Rachel's day. Whatever issues we have stay buried until tomorrow. You will smile for photos, walk her down the aisle, and keep your distance from Wade." "Understood." Bryson removed her hand from his arm. "I will fulfill my obligations as Rachel's father. Beyond that, Make no demands of me, Melanie. You forfeited that right when you plotted to exclude me from my daughter's wedding. Before she could respond, the wedding coordinator, the real one, hired by the venue, approached. Mr. Hargrove, the photographer is ready for you in the garden. Thank you. He nodded to Melanie. Shall we maintain appearances for one last day? The pre-ceremony photographs proceeded with artificial harmony. Bryson stood stoically beside Melanie, smiling when directed, maintaining perfect composure. Wade hovered nearby, ostensibly assisting the photographer, but actually keeping a watchful eye on Bryson. As the ceremony approached, Bryson found a moment alone with Rachel in the bridal suite. You look beautiful, he told her, genuine emotion breaking through his carefully maintained facade. Rachel beamed, adjusting her veil. Thanks, Dad. Are you and Mom behaving? Absolutely. Today is about you, not us. She took his hands in hers. I know things haven't been great between you two lately, but I appreciate you putting that aside for me. I would do anything for you, Rachel. Never doubt that. When the music began, Bryson took his place beside Rachel at the garden entrance. As the guests rose in anticipation, he leaned down and whispered, "Whatever happens today, know that I love you and only want your happiness." She squeezed his arm in response, and they began their walk down the aisle. The ceremony itself was flawless. Vows exchanged, rings presented, tears shed by appropriate parties. Bryson maintained his dignified presence throughout, aware of Melanie's watchful gaze from the front row, where she sat with Wade conspicuously at her side. As the celebration moved to the reception, the true orchestration of Bryson's plan began to unfold. Guests entered the ballroom to find not the seating arrangement Melanie had demanded, but Bryson's corrected version. The bride and groom at the center of the head table, flanked by both parents, with Wade relegated to a distant table shared with distant cousins. Melanie's face tightened when she saw the arrangement, but with hundreds of guests watching, she could only take her assigned seat beside Rachel. Wade, after a moment's hesitation, moved toward his distant table, shooting daggers at Bryson with his eyes. The reception began with standard formalities. First dance, toasts, dinner service. Throughout it all, Bryson maintained cordial conversation with guests at the head table, ignoring Melanie's frigid silence beside him. After the main course was cleared, the venue manager approached the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with dancing, the owner of the Belridge would like to offer a special presentation in honor of the bride and groom. Melanie frowned in confusion. What presentation? This wasn't in the schedule. Bryson merely smiled as the lights dimmed, and a large screen descended behind the head table. The manager continued, Mr. Hargrove has prepared a tribute to the happy couple. A collective gasp swept through the room as the manager inadvertently revealed Bryson's ownership of the venue. Melanie turned to him, shock evident on her face. You own the Belridge, she whispered furiously. You bought our daughter's wedding venue without telling me? Surprise, Bryson replied quietly as the presentation began. On screen, a montage of family photos appeared. Rachel growing up, family vacations, milestone celebrations. The assembled guests oohed and awed at the sentimental display. But then the tone shifted. Text appeared on screen. The truth behind today's celebration. What followed was a carefully edited series of communications. Melanie's email discussing minimizing Bryson's presence at the wedding, the accidental text about banning him entirely, Wade and Garrett's recorded conversation about accessing Rachel's trust fund, and finally, the airline reservations showing Melanie and Wade's planned departure the day after the wedding. The ballroom fell silent as the evidence mounted. Rachel stared at the screen in horror, while Garrett shifted uncomfortably beside her. Preston watched with grim satisfaction from a nearby table. And Melanie sat frozen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling with each damning revelation. When the lights came up, all eyes turned to the head table. Rachel was the first to break the silence. Mom, her voice cracked with betrayal. Is this true? Were you planning to leave right after my wedding? Melanie struggled to find words. Rachel, it's not what it looks like. Your father is manipulating. The evidence speaks for itself, Bryson interrupted calmly. Every document, every recording all authentic. I simply thought the truth should come to light before you embarked on your new life, Rachel. Some people aren't who they pretend to be. Wade stood from his distant table, attempting damage control. This is outrageous. A complete violation of privacy and— Sit down, Mr. Thornton, Bryson commanded. Unless you'd like me to share the background check detailing your history of defrauding wealthy women. The ballroom buzzed with shocked whispers. Rachel turned to Garrett, tears streaming down her face. Did you know about this? Were you helping them get my trust fund? Garrett took her hands. I did, but I told your father everything. That's how he knew to protect you. I made a terrible mistake listening to them, Rachel. I'm so sorry. Melanie stood abruptly, her chair toppling backward. How dare you humiliate me like this, Bryson? In front of everyone we know. How dare I? Bryson's voice remained measured. You plan to abandon our family, stealing our daughter's wedding fund in the process. You plotted to exclude me from her special day. You conspired with her fiancé to access her trust fund. And you have the audacity to speak of humiliation. Wade was making his way toward the exit, but found his path blocked by two security guards, Bryson's men, positioned there in anticipation. Let me explain something to everyone here, Bryson continued, standing to address the stunned guests. I built everything my family has enjoyed from nothing. I provided a life of privilege and opportunity. And in return, I expected only loyalty and honesty. He turned to Melanie. You chose neither. So now you face the consequences of that choice, publicly and irrevocably. Rachel was sobbing openly now. Why? She asked her mother. Why would you do this? Melanie looked frantically around the room, searching for sympathy and finding none. You don't understand what it's been like, she said desperately. Living in his shadow, never having my own identity. Save it, Preston interrupted, approaching the head table. We all know the truth now. You were willing to hurt everyone, including your own children, for what? For him. He gestured toward Wade, who stood helplessly between the guards. Bryson nodded to the venue manager, who approached with an envelope. Inside you'll find divorce papers, Bryson told Melanie, already filed with the court. The terms reflect the infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement. You leave with what you brought to the marriage, which, as I recall, was very little. He turned to Wade. As for you, Mr. Thornton, I've taken the liberty of contacting the authorities in Arizona regarding certain financial irregularities in your past. They're quite interested in speaking with you. Wade paled visibly. You can't do this. I already have. Bryson turned back to the assembled guests. I apologize for this unpleasant interlude during what should be a joyous occasion. The celebration will continue for those who wish to stay. He looked at Rachel, whose tears had given way to a stunned numbness. I'm sorry you had to learn the truth this way, sweetheart. But better today than after they'd taken what was rightfully yours. The aftermath was chaotic. Some guests departed in embarrassment. Others stayed to witness the drama unfold. Melanie, humiliated beyond recovery, fled the ballroom with Wade close behind, only to find their belongings had been removed from the suite they'd shared and placed in the lobby, along with a single economy class ticket back to Havenbrook in Wade's name. The wedding reception continued in subdued fashion, with Rachel and Garrett eventually regaining enough composure to share their first dance. Bryson watched from a distance, his expression unreadable as he sipped his champagne. Preston joined him at the bar. Was all that really necessary? Couldn't you have exposed them privately? Would they have shown me the same consideration? Bryson asked. Besides, public consequences have a way of ensuring the lesson sticks. Rachel may never forgive you for turning her wedding into this. Bryson nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps, but she'll never be deceived by them again, either. Sometimes protection requires difficult choices. As the night wore on, the mood gradually lifted. By the time Rachel and Garrett departed for their honeymoon, genuine smiles had returned to their faces, tempered by the day's revelations, but determined to move forward. Bryson watched them leave, satisfaction mixing with a tinge of regret. The price of justice was high, but necessary. As he had learned long ago, betrayal without consequences only invited more betrayal. Chapter 8. Consequences and Calculations. The days following the wedding brought a whirlwind of aftermath. Melanie retreated to her sister's home in Connecticut, her reputation in shambles among their social circle. Wade disappeared entirely, fleeing to parts unknown after discovering that Bryson had indeed contacted authorities about his history of financial improprieties. Bryson returned to the quiet emptiness of his house, methodically removing Melanie's remaining possessions and placing them in storage. He worked with cold efficiency, erasing her presence from the home they'd shared for over 2 decades. Preston called frequently, concerned about his father's emotional state. "Are you actually okay?" he asked during one such call. "You've ended a 24-year marriage and publicly humiliated Mom in the span of a few months." "I'm fine," Bryson assured him. This was inevitable once her true nature revealed itself. "That's not a normal reaction, Dad. What would you prefer? That I fall apart? Beg her to return? Some betrayals can't be forgiven, Preston. You'll understand that someday." The truth was more complex than Bryson admitted. Each night, alone in his study, he reviewed the surveillance photos of Melanie and Wade, searching for the moment when everything changed. When had his wife of 24 years decided he was disposable? When had protecting his family transformed into dismantling it? 1 week after the wedding, Rachel returned early from her honeymoon. She arrived at Bryson's door unannounced, her expression a mixture of anger and confusion. "We need to talk," she said as he invited her in. They sat in the living room, the space between them heavy with unspoken recriminations. "You humiliated Mom in front of everyone I know," Rachel began. "You turned my wedding into a public execution." Bryson nodded, accepting the accusation. "I revealed the truth. Timing and method were my choice, yes. Why that way? Why not tell me privately? Give me a chance to process it. Would you have believed me without evidence? Would you have accepted that your mother and Wade were manipulating Garrett to access your trust fund?" Rachel looked away. "I don't know. Exactly. And by then, it would have been too late. The money would be gone. Your mother vanished to Arizona with her lover. You could have stopped them without destroying my wedding day. Perhaps. But remember who initiated this destruction, Rachel. It wasn't me who planned to leave immediately after your wedding. It wasn't me who tried to bar your father from attending. It wasn't me who conspired with your fiancée behind her back." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I keep asking myself what was real. Was Mom ever really excited about my wedding? Or was it all just cover for her escape plan?" Bryson moved to sit beside her, his voice softening. "Your mother loves you, Rachel. That part was real. But she made choices that placed her desires above your well-being. I couldn't allow that to continue. Garrett told me everything. About Wade approaching him, about Mom's encouragement, and about how he confessed to you. He made the right choice in the end. Because you threatened him. I gave him a choice," Bryson corrected. "He could continue betraying you or stand by your side honestly. He chose you." Rachel wiped away her tears. "This isn't how I imagined starting my marriage. Few things in life unfold as we imagine them. The question is how we respond to the reality we're given." She studied her father's face, searching for something in his impassive expression. "You don't seem hurt by any of this. 24 years of marriage ends, and you're just cold. What purpose would emotional displays serve? Would they change what happened? Would they undo Melanie's betrayal? It would show you're human, Dad." Bryson smiled faintly. "I'm very human, Rachel. But I learned long ago that allowing emotions to dictate actions leads to vulnerability. Your mother took advantage of that vulnerability in others, in you and Garrett, even in Wade himself. So what now? We just never speak to Mom again. That decision is yours to make. My path is clear." Rachel stood to leave, pausing at the door. "Garrett and I are staying with his parents until we figure things out. I need time to process everything. Take all the time you need. The truth doesn't change with time, only our ability to accept it." After she left, Bryson returned to his office and made a call to Harrison. "The divorce proceedings?" he asked without preamble. "Moving forward as planned," Harrison replied. "Melanie's attorney has requested a settlement conference, but given the prenup and evidence of infidelity, they have little leverage. And the Sedona property Wade purchased traced back to funds Melanie withdrew. We've included it in the filing as evidence of financial misconduct. Good. Keep me updated. That evening, as Bryson reviewed documents in his study, the doorbell rang. To his surprise, Garrett stood on the doorstep, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Mr. Hargrove, I need to talk to you." Bryson invited him in. "Rachel mentioned you were staying with your parents." "We are, but there's something you should know." Garrett handed him a phone. "Wade contacted me today. He wants to make a deal." On the screen was a text message. "Tell your father-in-law I have information he wants. About Melanie's other plans. About people she contacted regarding his business. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone or no deal." Bryson's expression darkened. "What other plans?" "I don't know." He wouldn't say more over text. "Why come to me with this? Why not go alone?" as he asked. Garrett met his gaze steadily. "Because I'm done with secrets and lies. Rachel deserves better, and so do you." Bryson nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "You've made the right choice." "Again, what will you do?" "Meet him, of course, but not alone." The following afternoon, Bryson arrived at Riverside Park 15 minutes early, accompanied by Thorne, who positioned himself discreetly nearby. At precisely 3 p.m., Wade appeared, looking considerably less polished than at the wedding. His designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a rumpled jacket. His confident swagger diminished. "You didn't come alone," Wade observed, glancing toward Thorne. "Neither did you," Bryson replied, nodding toward a woman sitting on a bench pretending to read. "Melanie couldn't resist being part of this, could she?" Wade's surprise confirmed the guess. "We need to talk about our mutual future." "We have no mutual future, Mr. Thornton." "We could. I have information you'll find valuable. Information about whom Melanie contacted regarding your business practices." Bryson smiled thinly. "You mean her pathetic attempts to find dirt on my company? The calls to former employees, to regulatory agencies, to business competitors? I've known about those for months." Wade's confidence faltered. "Then you know she found someone willing to testify about irregularities in your land acquisitions." "Fiction. My business practices are aggressive but impeccable. Harrison ensures that." Bryson stepped closer. "Is this really the deal you wanted to offer? Vague insinuations about non-existent improprieties?" "I can convince Melanie to drop the divorce fight," Wade countered desperately. "To accept the prenup terms without dragging your name through litigation. The prenup is ironclad. Her litigation would only further humiliate her." Bryson glanced toward Melanie's hiding spot. "Is that what you want, Melanie? More public humiliation?" After a moment's hesitation, Melanie emerged from behind the bench, her face tight with anger. "You've taken everything from me," she said, approaching them. "My home, my dignity, my children's respect. You surrendered those things willingly when you chose betrayal," Bryson replied. "Don't blame me for the consequences of your actions. I gave you 24 years of my life, and I gave you everything money could buy. The difference is I honor my vows." Wade stepped between them. "We're willing to disappear completely. No contest on the divorce, no contact with Rachel or Preston, no attempts to access any funds. In exchange for a reasonable settlement." Bryson laughed coldly. "A reasonable settlement? You think you're in a position to negotiate? Everyone has a price," Wade insisted. "Even you." "True, but yours is far lower than you imagine." Bryson turned to Melanie. "You'll receive exactly what the prenup stipulates. The assets you brought to the marriage, adjusted for inflation. Nothing more." "That's practically nothing," she protested. "Precisely." Bryson checked his watch. "This conversation is over. Any further contact will be through our attorneys." As he turned to leave, Melanie called after him. "Was any of it real for you, Bryson? Our marriage, our family? Or was it all just another business acquisition?" He paused, considering the question. "It was real until you made it transactional. Until Wade convinced you I was just an ATM to fund your next chapter." "I loved you once," she said quietly. "Perhaps, but not enough to honor that love when tested." Bryson nodded to Thorne, who approached to escort him away. "Goodbye, Melanie." As they walked toward the parking lot, Thorne asked, "Do you want me to continue surveillance on them?" "No, they're irrelevant now. Focus on Rachel and Garrett. Make sure they're truly clear of this mess. That night, alone in his study, Bryson opened his journal and made a final entry about Melanie. The price of betrayal has been paid in full. Chapter closed. Chapter 9. Empire of Ashes. 3 months after the wedding, life had settled into a new pattern. Bryson immersed himself in work, expanding Hargrove Enterprises with a series of aggressive acquisitions. The Belridge Hotel was renovated completely and rebranded as the flagship property of a new hospitality division. Preston returned to medical school, calling regularly but maintaining some emotional distance. Rachel and Garrett purchased a home in a neighboring town, rebuilding their relationship on more honest foundations. Their visits to Bryson were cordial but guarded. The divorce was finalized with minimal drama. Melanie accepted the prenuptial terms after her attorney confirmed the evidence against her made any challenge futile. She received a settlement that barely covered first month's rent on a modest apartment. Wade, facing potential charges in Arizona, disappeared entirely. On a crisp autumn evening, Bryson hosted a small dinner at his home, the first since Melanie's departure. Preston had returned for the weekend, and Rachel and Garrett joined them. The conversation remained carefully neutral, focusing on Preston's studies and Garrett's recent promotion. After dinner, as Bryson poured drinks in the living room, Rachel finally breached the unspoken boundary. "Have you heard from Mom?" Bryson handed her a glass. "No, the divorce is final. There's nothing more to discuss." "She called me last week," Rachel said cautiously. "She's struggling. The money from the divorce barely covered her expenses for a month. Her financial situation is no longer my concern." Preston joined the conversation. "She's living in a studio apartment and working as a sales associate at a department store. It's a pretty dramatic fall. Choices have consequences," Bryson replied. She chose Wade and his promises over her family. The outcome was predictable. "She says Wade cleaned out their joint account and disappeared," Rachel continued. "She has nothing left. Again, not my concern." Rachel set down her glass. "You really feel nothing for her? After 24 years? "I feel many things, Rachel. Disappointment, vindication, relief, but not responsibility for her current circumstances. She's the mother of your children," Preston pointed out, "and she was willing to abandon those children for a con man with a smooth line of talk. Does motherhood absolve her of that betrayal?" The siblings exchanged glances, recognizing the immovability in their father's tone. "We're not asking you to take her back," Rachel clarified. "Just maybe ensure she's not destitute." Bryson considered this for a moment. "Your concern for her is natural. You're better people than she deserves. But understand this. Forgiveness without consequences isn't mercy. It's enabling. Melanie needs to rebuild her life on her own terms, just as she chose to destroy her old one." The subject was dropped, but later, as Garrett helped Bryson clear the dessert plates, he offered a different perspective. "They still love her, you know, despite everything." Bryson nodded. "As they should. My issues with Melanie shouldn't dictate their relationship with their mother." "And what about you?" Garrett asked hesitantly. "Is there any path to, I don't know, not reconciliation, but peace?" "Peace comes from justice, Garrett. Justice has been served. I am at peace." The truth was more complex. In the quiet hours after his children left, Bryson found himself standing in what had been Melanie's garden, now neglected and overgrown. He'd instructed the groundskeeper to leave it untended, a physical manifestation of what happens when nurturing ceases. His phone rang, breaking the moment of reflection. An unfamiliar number. "Mr. Hargrove?" A woman's voice, professionally neutral. "This is Mercy Hospital in Philadelphia. We have you listed as the emergency contact for Melanie Hargrove." Bryson's grip tightened on the phone. "Ex-wife. What's happened?" "Mrs. Hargrove was admitted following a suicide attempt. She's stable but sedated. Hospital policy requires us to notify emergency contacts." "I understand. Thank you for the information." Bryson ended the call, staring at the dying garden. He should feel something, he thought. Grief, perhaps. Concern. Instead, he felt a cold certainty that this, too, was part of the natural consequence of betrayal. The ultimate manipulation tactic, using self-harm to force a response. He called Preston first. Their son should know about his mother's condition. Then Rachel. Both immediately made plans to travel to Philadelphia. Neither asked if Bryson would join them. They already knew the answer. In the days that followed, Bryson received regular updates from Preston. Melanie was recovering physically but struggling mentally. The hospital was arranging psychiatric care. She kept asking if Bryson knew, if he had responded in any way. What should I tell her? Preston asked during one call. The truth, Bryson replied. That I was notified as her emergency contact. That I informed you and Rachel immediately. That my involvement ends there. That's cold, Dad. It's honest. Would you prefer I pretend concern I don't feel? Preston sighed. Sometimes I wonder if you ever loved her at all. The question lingered after they hung up. Had he loved Melanie? Certainly. He had believed he did. He had provided for her every material desire, protected her from hardship, given her a life of privilege. Was that not love? Or had it been, as she claimed in those final confrontations, merely another business transaction, stability and status for her, loyalty and family for him? A week later, Bryson received an unexpected visitor. Garrett arrived alone, looking uncomfortable but determined. Rachel doesn't know I'm here, he began. But I needed to talk to you man to man. About Melanie? About forgiveness. Garrett sat across from Bryson in the study. Not for Melanie's sake, but for yours. Bryson raised an eyebrow. You think I need forgiveness? I think holding on to this level of resentment comes at a cost. I've watched you systematically dismantle Melanie's life. The divorce, the public humiliation, cutting off all financial support. You've won every battle. At what point is it enough? An interesting perspective from someone who nearly betrayed my daughter for financial gain. Garrett flinched but held his ground. Fair point. But you gave me a chance to redeem myself, to prove I truly love Rachel. Shouldn't 24 years of marriage earn at least that much? The length of betrayal doesn't mitigate its severity. Quite the opposite. I'm not suggesting reconciliation or even direct contact, just a recognition that she's the mother of your children. That complete destitution serves no one's interest, least of all Rachel and Preston's. Bryson studied the younger man thoughtfully. You've become quite the advocate for compassion. Rachel is devastated by her mother's suicide attempt. She blames herself for not helping more. And yes, she blames you for your inflexibility. And you think financial support would solve this? I think it would show your children that your capacity for vengeance has limits. That somewhere inside you, there's still humanity that transcends business calculations. After Garrett left, Bryson sat alone in his study for hours, contemplating the situation. Not from an emotional perspective, but through the cold logic that had guided him since childhood. Was his continued refusal to offer Melanie any assistance beyond the divorce settlement truly in his best interest? Or was it, as Garrett suggested, exacting a cost he hadn't fully calculated? Rachel and Preston were distancing themselves. His reputation in certain circles had suffered, not from exposing Melanie's betrayal, which most people understood, but from the ruthlessness of his response. Even Harrison had tactfully suggested that some minimal support might be strategically advisable to maintain family harmony. The next morning, Bryson called his attorney, set up a small monthly stipend for Melanie, enough to cover basic expenses for a modest apartment. No lump sum, no direct contact. The payments stop immediately if she attempts any publicity or litigation. A wise decision, Harrison approved. May I ask what changed your mind? Nothing changed, Bryson replied. This is simply the most efficient resolution to an ongoing distraction. He didn't mention Garrett's visit or the growing realization that his children's perception of him mattered more than he'd admitted. This wasn't forgiveness. It was strategic adaptation. That evening, he received a text from Rachel. Preston told me what you did. Thank you. No further explanation was needed. The gesture, minimal as it was, had been registered and appreciated. Not a victory, but perhaps a small step toward repairing the damage to his relationship with his children. 1 month later, Bryson hosted a small gathering at his home to celebrate Preston's acceptance into a prestigious surgical residency program. Rachel and Garrett attended, along with a few close friends. The atmosphere was warmer than previous gatherings, the conversation easier. As the evening wound down, Rachel joined Bryson on the patio, where he stood watching the stars. "Mom's doing better," she said without preamble. "The therapy seems to be helping. She's found a better job at a boutique downtown." "I'm glad to hear it," Bryson replied, surprised to find he meant it. "Not for Melanie's sake, but for his children's. She asked me to thank you for the stipend. She knows it doesn't mean forgiveness." "It doesn't." Rachel nodded, understanding. "You know, I used to think you and Mom were so different. She was emotional, gregarious, expressive. You were logical, reserved, controlled. But you're actually similar in one important way." "How so?" "Neither of you knows how to bend. Mom couldn't adapt to the limitations of marriage and family. You can't adapt to the possibility of forgiveness." Bryson considered this assessment. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply understand that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt." "Maybe." Rachel leaned against the railing beside him. "But I've learned something important from all this." "What's that?" "That love without forgiveness becomes poison. For everyone involved." She squeezed his arm gently. "I don't expect you to forgive Mom, but I hope someday you can let go of the anger. For your sake, not hers." After his children left, Bryson returned to his study and opened the leather journal that had documented his journey. He turned to the final entry about Melanie and added a single line. "The price of betrayal includes collateral damage.